Hey everybody, today we're going to be talking about blood types and blood typing. So we have a couple of vocab words we have to go through. First is antigen. And an antigen is anything your body sees as foreign. So for example, anything that the body mounts an immune response against. In the case of blood typing, that immune response is going to be the production of antibody. So antibodies are small proteins that are very specific for their target, and when they bind to them, they're going to cause them to clump up. And we call that agglutination. All right, so little antibodies, they kind of look like little Y-shaped things, have binding sites at the two ends of the Y. And when these bind to the target, it's going to cause them to clump up. The other vocab word that we need to talk about is blood type. There are four main blood types: A, B, AB, and O. And it's based on what proteins you have on the surface of your blood cells. Okay, so the protein that you have on there determines whether, if you take your cells and put them into somebody else's body, are they going to be seen as an antigen, or are they just going to be seen as no big deal? So again, your blood type is based on what's on the surface of the red blood cells. So let's take a look at that. There are four main types. They're made up of two different proteins, A protein or B protein. So if you have type A blood, the reason you have type A blood is because you have type A protein on the surface of your cells. Okay, we call this type A antigen. If you have type B blood, you're going to have B protein on the surface of your blood cells. It's very different. You can see it's actually, I've drawn it as a different shape. And so things that see type B as foreign might not see type A as foreign because they're actually a different shape. If you have type, oh, that's not a very good circle. If you have type A blood, AB blood, you actually end up having both A and B proteins on the surface of your red blood cells. And if you have type O blood, O actually stands for none. You don't have A or B on the surface of your red blood cells. Now remember, antibodies are little proteins that are very specific for their target, and they are in the serum. So in your blood, there's the liquidy part, the sort of straw-colored, yellowish-colored part, and in there are various different gases and proteins and things, some of which are antibodies. In a person with type A blood, they're going to have antibodies against type B protein. So these people have type anti-B antibodies. The people that have type B blood are actually going to produce anti-A antibodies. And then people that have AB blood, it wouldn't make sense for them to have antibodies against A or B because they have both on the surface of their cells. So they end up with neither A nor B antibodies. They don't have any antibodies against either one, A or B blood types. People with type O blood, however, remember they don't have A or B on the surface of their cells at all. So they end up with anti-A and anti-B antibodies, which is all very well and good. You can see that nobody has antibodies against their own blood. But once we start messing around with transfusions, it can be good or it could be very disastrous. So first, let's start with type A person. Type E person was running through the woods and got mauled by a bear. Type A is bleeding out. The only person in the vicinity is type B. If we were to take type B blood and put it into type A person, what would happen? Well, this person has B proteins on the surface. This person has anti-B antibodies in their blood. When these cells come into this person's body, the anti-B antibodies will bind to them and will cause these newly infused cells to clump up and probably get stuck in various places in the body, like the small capillaries of the brain or the heart or various other places. So this would be very bad. This would have a bad transfusion reaction. So you can't go that direction. All right, well, what else could you do? Well, maybe you have another friend that's standing around that has AB blood. So let's try and do a transfusion this way, and let's see what happens. So when you do a transfusion, you have to look at the proteins that are on the surface of the cells being transfused in, and the antibodies that are in the serum of the person that's receiving the blood. So this cell has A and B on it, and this person produces antibodies against type B. So these antibodies would attack the B antigen on these cells, so this would also be a very bad transfusion reaction. What about type O blood? Type O blood, if we were to transfuse it from this person into here to our type A bleeding mauled victim, this guy's got no antigen on the surface of its cell. So even though this one has anti-B antibodies, this doesn't have any B on it. So that would be okay. So type O can donate to type A. So let's change it up a little bit. Let's say it's type B that got mauled by the bear. Can we take type A blood and put it into a type B person? Well, let's look. We have to look at the cells that are being transfused. They have A on them. And we have to look at the antibodies in the person that are going to respond. This person, type B person, has anti-A antibodies. These cells have A on them. So that won't work because these antibodies will attack those cells and cause them to clump up. All right, what about AB? Can we take AB and transfuse those into type B? Well, the B will be okay, but the A antigen that's on the surface of these cells will cause a problem because, again, we have anti-A antibodies. So this won't work either. What about type O? Well, you can see I'm drawing it in green, so you know that's something. Remember, this person has anti-A antibodies. This person doesn't have A or B on the surface of the cell. That's going to work. Type O can potentially donate to type B. Let's look at our AB. AB is bleeding out. What can we do? Well, maybe they've got a friend in type A, and that person can, oops, sorry, I drew it in the wrong color. That person can donate. Would that work? This person has A on the surface, and this person doesn't have any antibodies at all. So this would work. What about going this direction? This person has B on the surface, still no antibodies. That would work. This person doesn't have anything on the surface. This person has no antibodies. So the fact that AB doesn't have antibodies against A or B means that this person, if you are AB, you can receive blood from any of the blood types. That makes this person a universal receiver. They can just take blood from anybody. And if you've noticed, we've already shown that O can donate blood to any of these people. So it makes O the universal donor. Okay. What about O? Can O receive from anybody? Not likely, because look at what's in the serum of a person with type O blood. They're going to have antibodies against A and B, and all the other blood types have at least A or B on them. So we're not going to be able to receive blood from anyone. So even though O is the universal donor, it really can only receive, if you are type O blood, which a lot of people are, if you are type O blood, you can only receive blood from people with your own blood type. So people with type A blood can receive from O and from A. People with type B blood can receive from B and from O. And people with type AB blood can receive from everybody but can't donate to anybody. Okay, so that is how we deal with blood typing, the major groups. There's one other thing that we have to talk about though, which is RH. So remember our, let's see, we'll do a type A person. Type A blood has type A antigen on it, right? Remember that? And in the serum, this person is going to have anti-B antibodies. There's one more blood group that we call RH. Sometimes people will call it D antigen. RH you either have or you don't have. And we don't worry too much about the antibodies. So let's draw, what color should we draw RH? Let's draw it with purple. So if you are RH positive, it means you have the RH antigen on the surface of your cell. So this person isn't just A, they're A positive. If you were A negative, another really beautifully drawn cell, you would look like this. So this person is A negative. Negative means there's no RH. So if you have Rh antigen, you're not going to make Rh antibody, right? Because you have it. Why would you make it against yourself? You would then have an autoimmune disease and you would probably die. However, if you do not have the Rh antibody and you received a transfusion from somebody who does have Rh, you would see these as foreign. And so what would you produce? You would produce anti-Rh antibodies. Now, the funny thing about all this blood typing stuff is that, remember how I told you you would have type A and then you would have type B anti-B antibodies? This you're born with. You already have this. You don't actually ever have to see B to make these antibodies. But with Rh, what happens is you don't make the anti-Rh antibodies until this happens, until you're exposed to somebody with Rh. And again, the people that have Rh will never make Rh antibodies. Only people that don't have it. So where this comes into play is during pregnancy. When you're pregnant, okay, here's our pregnant lady. If the mom is Rh positive and the baby's Rh positive, then we have no trouble at all, because mom is never going to make antibodies against something that she already has. Where it comes into play is when mom is Rh negative. So if this was Rh negative and baby is Rh positive, what happens is all of the Rh, all the curly things that are Rh, are going to be on the baby's cells. Now, during pregnancy, the placenta protects the blood cells, and so very few of the baby's blood cells actually get into the maternal circulation. But during delivery, there's all kinds of mixing of blood and tearing of things and what have you. And so mom gets sensitized to something that she doesn't have, Rh positive. So mom makes anti-Rh antibodies. So mom is pretty good and baby is crawling around and is happy, but mom has made anti-Rh antibodies. So where this comes into effect is pregnancy number 2. Baby number 2. This was baby number 1. We sensitized mom to Rh. In baby number 2, oops, I forgot to make her pregnant. There she is. In baby number 2, if baby number 2 is Rh positive and mom is Rh negative still, she's already sensitized. She already has Rh antibodies. Now remember, in the first situation, the blood cells didn't cross the placenta, so they were all kept in there with the babies. But in pregnancy number 2, she already has these antibodies, and these antibodies can cross the placenta. So what happens is she's made Rh antibodies, anti-Rh antibodies, and they cross the placenta and they attack the baby. They attack all of the baby's blood cells. I guess I should make this in red because this is a terrible situation. Okay? It's called hemolytic disease of the newborn. Okay? So hemolytic, hemo is blood, lysis, so lysing, breaking up the blood cells of the newborn. And this can cause miscarriage. This can cause a lot of, if it doesn't cause miscarriage, it can actually cause a lot of developmental problems for the baby because the baby doesn't have any blood cells to carry oxygen around during development. There is something that you can take. It's called RhoGAM. I don't know, it's some combination of upper and lowercase letters. But basically what it does is, remember our red blood cell? You've got some kind of antigen on there, and then you've got your Rh. What it does is it protects, it blocks that Rh from being seen. So what they do is when you're pregnant, if you are Rh negative, if you are an Rh negative woman and you are pregnant, they're going to give you a shot of RhoGAM midway through your pregnancy. And then they're going to give you another shot of it just before delivery to try and protect you from ever making these Rh antibodies, because they don't want you to make antibodies against Rh. What this means is in pregnancy number 2, you don't have any antibodies. So there's nothing to cross the placenta and hurt the baby. They're going to give you RhoGAM in that pregnancy too. So it used to be if you were Rh negative woman and you had any possibility at all of having a Rh positive baby, you would get one baby. The first baby's fine. but it's the second pregnancy that's the problem. And so people who were in this situation could only have one child. The other children were either developmentally damaged during development of the fetus, or perhaps had a spontaneous miscarriage. Okay, so that's blood types A, B, AB, O, and RH. We'll talk in another video about blood typing.